The Overwatch 2 meta has shifted drastically since the release of the game a few weeks ago. So we have moved into a dive heavy comp, and a lot of the top players around the world have been using this dive heavy comp, right? So in today's video, we're going to be going into what caused this change, how you can play with this comp effectively, and honestly how you can absolutely dominate all the ranks with this comp if played properly. So before we dive into this video, once again, if you guys are not subscribed, make sure you guys are subscribed. I have been dishing out a lot of guides for Overwatch 2 since release, so make sure you guys check those out, and let's get straight into this. Alright, so what better not to look at this from the perspective of some of the top teams in the world right now. So what's going on right now in Overwatch 2 is the Overwatch League players are playing in the playoffs. I guess this is around day 4 or 5 from the playoffs. So what we're going to be looking at is pretty much the comp here from the perspective of the Shocks versus the Gladiators. This game was absolutely insane. I highly recommend you guys actually check out the VOD. So basically what you have here is you have Lucio, you have Sojourn, Kiriko, Reaper, and Winston. So the first thing that jumps at you when you look at these heroes is that you'll start to notice that every single one of these heroes has insane mobility capacity, right? Let's take Lucio for example, because he's the perfect example, right? The thing with Lucio is that if he's very good with his mechanics, knows how to jump across walls, climb up on walls, he will be almost impossible to catch off position. Now you combine that with Lucio's mobility, right, enhanced speed, and especially his ult beat, right, a lot of things just enable him to make sure his team is able to dive as quickly as possible. Next thing, let's move on to Winston, right? Winston is a very easy example to go over, right? Winston's whole kit enables him to jump on the back line of the enemy team, which you see a lot of these pro players here on the top of the scene doing. So Winston's primary focus is usually to either you shut down that healer, right, which would be Kiriko in this case if the teams are playing the same heroes, or even Lucio, but he's much harder for Winston to catch just because of that mobility gap. So what you want to do as Winston here is you want to jump on the back line, right, disable the main DPS. For this composition, that would be Sojourn, so I'll go over that in a little bit, right? So you want to shut down the main DPS because that's going to cause you the most threat to Winston. Now believe it or not, Winston besides his bubble is actually quite squishy if you compare him to, for example, Zarya or even Roadhog. I did a guide on that previously, so make sure you guys check that out. But yeah, besides the point, Winston is very squishy. So if a Sojourn, for example, at this level of play with a lot of skill locks on him, can absolutely destroy him within seconds. So what Winston wants to do is shut down that DPS or that healer support as soon as possible. So next up we have Reaper. Now when it comes to Reaper, his playstyle is very unique, and especially you guys will be able to see that throughout these games where the top players in the top of the world are playing, right? So as Reaper, you typically want to go for the tanks. Now I know this sounds kind of crazy because typically you want to fight, right, the DPS first or the support just because those are the most squishy. The thing with Reaper is that he can absolutely tear tanks apart, and that's kind of why you want him there, right? For example, a Sojourn's job, which we'll go over in a little bit, right, wants to target the squishies. Reaper, on the other hand, actually has the capability of diving your tank and taking him out, just because he can actually soak up a lot of damage due to the lifesteal from his hits, right? So Reaper does enable you to dive into the tank and then dive into the support. So you got a double dive there, and it's quite powerful in a lot of situations. And then next up we have Kiriko. She's absolutely my favorite, as you guys know, just because of her whole kit. And honestly, I believe Kiriko is what puts this whole comp together, right? Let's look at her, for example, ult, right? Perfect example. As soon as she blasts out all her teammates get speed boost, get damage boost, rate of fire, everything is amplified. Whatever you have going on in the field is amplified. So think about it this way, right? You engage a fight, you have the enemy team in front of you, and then you have your team behind you, right? And then you have your healer all the way in the back line. So you rush in very fast, reach the back line, right? Take out the supports, take out the DPS, and then focus the tank. And during this whole time, your Reaper is building up that ult, right? Death Blossom. Absolutely destructive ult from tearing apart that tank, right? That's also another reason why you want to target the tanks as a Reaper, just because you can honestly get so many shots off and build up your ult, right? And I talked about this previously in my previous guide when it comes to how you can counter Roadhog, right? If you're dealing with a very tanky tank, just build up your ult off of his body. Honestly, just shoot him, build up your ult, and then take out the DPS. That's the best way to approach it. And then last but surely not least, we're going to be going over Sojourn here. Now Sojourn is absolutely insane, right? And I'm pretty sure in this game you guys have seen Proper and Happy pop off with Sojourn, right? I'm pretty sure Proper actually ended up being the MVP of the season here for the playoffs on this day, which is absolutely insane, right? Now, the thing about Sojourn is her kit is so powerful that I literally did a video dedicated on how you can actually counter Sojourn. Now, once again, you want to definitely check that one out because it's pretty insane and there's a lot of good tips there, right? So the thing with Sojourn is that she can absolutely one-shot almost anything, right? And you notice a lot of these top tier players, what they're doing is they're shooting the tank or shooting whatever DPS is in front of them, and the last second before they shoot that rail, right, the rail shot that they built up the power in, they'll switch to that support and just boom, headshot, one shot, right? So she can absolutely destroy the comp, right? So that's, I believe, what brings the DPS together. And you'll notice in a lot of these fights, right, what the commentators will say, which you guys probably can't hear in this because I'm doing the commentary, of course, is that as soon as the Sojourn goes down, they'll say the DPS went down, what will they do now, right? In this whole comp, you'll notice that it's very mobility based, not necessarily DPS. And I think that is very key as we move on forward with the meta, right? When your Sojourn goes down, your Lucio can't really put out damage, right? Kiriko, I mean, sure, if she's really talented, maybe land a few shuriken and headshots, but when you're playing at this level of gameplay, I mean, you're not going to be able to land anything. Everyone is pretty insane at the game. And then you have Winston, who can't really do much, so all you're left with is Reaper. And Reaper has that distance gap, so if you have mobility also, and you're far away, there really isn't that much damage there, once again, right? So as soon as your Sojourn goes down, and I think this is why you have to be careful with this comp, you have to basically retreat, right? So the biggest key here is you want to keep your Sojourn alive as long as possible. So that's where Kiriko comes in, right? She's going to be pocketing that Sojourn quite a bit, damage boosting, throwing those healing paper clips and make sure that Sojourn is alive, right? Your Reaper goes down, kind of sucks, but not the end of the world. Your Sojourn goes down, that is your damage down by almost 50% in the whole fight, right? So Sojourn can't go down, right? That's kind of the biggest thing here. And you'll notice in all these fights, right, when one of the Sojourn goes down, that usually shifts in the other team's favorite unless something goes really wrong. And yeah, that's pretty much gonna wrap up kind of the whole gist of this comp, and I definitely want you guys to practice this with your team. Now, once again, right, you guys are seeing this from the perspective of some of the top players in the world, so you might not have as perfect synergy or as perfect communication skills, but this just comes to show how powerful this comp is, and it is quite balanced for sure. And the reason it's balanced is, for example, you have Winston, who's both decent on offensive abilities and defensive abilities, right? So he has a close range zap, jump, shields, and his ult that can help stall, right? That rage can basically boop enemies off the payload, stall for his team to get there, is absolutely destructive, right? But it's honestly one of the hardest ults to master. Then you have Reaper, who's close range, Sojourn, who's mid to long range, right? So she can play around with the range here a little bit. You have Lucio with his AoE heals, and then he also has that speed and defensive ult, right, which is very, very powerful, especially if your team is getting targeted, the enemy team throws out a bunch of ults, you can do this to counter them. And then last but not least, we have Kiriko's mid-range heal, also mobility, right, so she can jump back to her teammates if she's stuck in a position, she can Suzu, right, and honestly, we don't need to talk about this one because it is very, very powerful. And last but not least, she's honestly the best ult for attack, right? So if you're attacking and you have a Kiriko on your team, she uses that Kitsune ult. It is so powerful, right? It basically boosts. It's the way I like to think about it is like it's a nano for all your teammates. That's honestly what it is. Obviously, it's not as strong as a nano, for instance, if you look at the damage stats. But if all your teammates get this boost, I think it equalizes and even better than a nano because everyone gets to benefit from it, right? And once again, that's gonna pretty much wrap up today's video. Once again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to subscribe, right? Because I'll be dishing out a lot more guides, a lot more breakdown like these. I think it's the first time I do a breakdown of an Overwatch League game, so if you guys enjoyed this one, do let me know, and I'll do a lot more of these to help you guys better your game. Make sure you guys check out my other guides as well. I've done a guide on how you can counter Roadhog, how you can counter Sojourn. I'll do more counter guides, and as well as how you can stop losing rank, etc. So once again, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great one, and peace.